Good morning, everyone. We're expecting a big group to join us today. I'm Ara Shur. I'm Neep's Executive Director. And I wanted to welcome you to 2022 and to the first of Neep's Ready, Set, Scale webinar series. I'm really excited for this webinar and I'm excited for the whole series. There are two inspirations for our Ready, Set, Scale theme. And the first is you all, our partners. Across the Neep region, states and communities have strong climate protection goals, and achieving these goals really requires new ways of thinking and new ways of implementing. So Neep has been working with our partners, with you, as you design and demonstrate innovative programs, new business models, and a whole new generation of policies to advance the framework for equitable decarbonization. And with this series, we're going to highlight and share just a few of these efforts. The other inspiration for the series is the funding coming from the federal government for energy efficiency, clean energy, and other related infrastructure and climate protection activities. Financial resources are currently flowing to states and communities from the American Rescue Plan Act, and there's over $5 billion for energy efficiency alone in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Behind this, there's potentially even more for efficiency, for decarbonization, and for climate change mitigation. This is of course extremely exciting, but it's also really daunting. So unlike the 2008 stimulus era, projects are not expected to be shovel ready to receive funding, but they certainly will have to be implementable and ready to scale. So throughout the year, Neep will be highlighting mechanisms that are key to rapid, equitable decarbonization of the built environment. We'll bring together leaders from around the Neep region and beyond to share the challenges and successes that they have had in deploying innovation in policy and regulation, in program design, business models, technology deployment, and like today, in community-led solutions. These are ideas that are ready to scale, and we hope that you will join us for this year-long series and also give us feedback. We'd really like to hear from you. What topics would you like to hear more about? What are you thinking about as you're looking about the opportunities ahead? And what can we do to help you get to scale? So today, we are focusing on community decarbonization planning. I want to welcome John Balfe, Neep Senior Building and Community Solutions Manager, to get us started. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Ara. Thank you very much for the intro, and I'm just as excited as you are to be kicking off this series, and especially excited to launch it with our focus on community decarbonization efforts.
Yeah, I agree. Planning is always the best place to start, so I'll leave you to it, John.
Thank you very much. All right, so as Ava mentioned, my name is John Balfe. I'm a senior manager on the Buildings and Communities team at Neep. Neep is a regional nonprofit organization that's committed to improving energy efficiency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the building sector throughout the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. So on the next slide here. Thank you, Victoria. So just a couple of things to note before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and we will send it out to folks afterwards. We are working to improve our accessibility. So closed captioning is enabled on this webinar. You are able to disable that feature located in the lower right corner of your Zoom panel if you don't want to see the closed captioning there. As I said, slides and recording will be sent to everybody that registered, and feel free to share those with your colleagues or other communities that you're working with as well. Everybody will remain on mute throughout the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions, comments, technical issues, please feel free to type those into the chat box at any time. There's also, there's a Q&A section in a chat box, so feel free to type into any of those and it'll get to the organizers here. So as I mentioned a little bit about Neep, we work on a wide variety of different topics, from working with communities and state partners on policies and programs, to working on the adoption of technology such as air source heat pumps, to working on workforce development. And this is really all enabled by our funding, our funders and our partners. So you can see here some of the foundations that we work with, our vast allies network of private companies in the energy industry, and our state partners as well. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all of these great groups that support our work and allow us to do the things that we do. So today's webinar is focused primarily or solely really on community decarbonization planning efforts. I'll provide a bit of a primer on that in just a moment, but we'll be hearing from two leading kind of small to mid-sized communities that are doing big things in this space, We'll hear from Worcester, Massachusetts, and Portland, Maine, that'll be joining us in a few minutes. They'll give about a 10-minute overview, kind of primer on the work that they're doing. And then the rest of the time will be spent in that deep dive discussion portion that you see on the screen there. So we really want to get into the nuts and bolts of things with you all, and we want to allow you to ask some questions of our speakers as well. So throughout their presentations and throughout the discussion, feel free to type into the chat box, provide your comments and your questions, and we'll get to those throughout the duration. And then in the final couple of minutes, I'll wrap up with a couple of resources for you to take a look at afterwards, and we'll be on our way. So just a little bit of background, as I know folks that are joining us today come from many different communities, many different states, are in a lot of different kind of positions with their community level work. So, you know, a lot of folks are setting goals, both at the city and the state level, setting aggressive climate goals, and they're taking steps to meet those goals. So the purposes of today's call is to talk about building decarbonization, which all revolves around kind of these three pillars that you see here in front of you. It involves efforts related to increasing energy efficiency and reducing the loads in our buildings. It involves adding more renewable energy generation to the mix so that our buildings are powered by cleaner energy sources. And lastly, it involves electrifying our end uses, such as heating systems. So these are the three key pathways that will lead us to a decarbonized building stock. Now, what we're talking about today is really how do you prepare plans? How do you create that long-term vision and those implementation strategies that will lead your community to achieve these goals? And I think you'll hear kind of a few key themes that I just want to bring up early on here throughout the webinar. First, the importance of stakeholder engagement. I think it's something that's, you know, all of us on the line are very aware of, but we really want to ensure that the voices from across our communities are heard throughout this process, throughout the planning process, and then also throughout the implementation. And even after that, we want to ensure that our underserved and our marginalized populations are included in this process, heard from, and are really benefiting from some of the plans that we're putting in place. So we'll hear our speakers how they really did this intentionally. The second theme you'll hear a bit about is securing buy-in and making sure that folks that are coming to the table understand the benefits, the many benefits, the multiple benefits of energy efficiency projects such as health and resiliency and things of that nature. And lastly, we'll talk a bit about, or a lot about really, the purpose of developing a comprehensive plan. You know, this is something that takes a lot of effort for a community to lead. And one thing that I learned from both of our speakers in our planning discussions is that, you know, planning isn't the end all be all. It's an important step in the process, but, you know, this must be paired with kind of near-term implementation strategies. It's easy to kind of get lost in the planning process, and you know, once you've completed the plan, you know, that's when a lot of the work really just begins. So I think you'll hear that theme come out a little bit too, and these folks thinking about you know, how to take action in the near term. So I hope that everybody on this webinar can really take something from our speakers, something that they can implement within their municipalities or with municipalities that they might work with, and really advance these decarbonization efforts at the local level, because there's so much great work happening across the region. And I just want to be able to you know, spur some more movement in these jurisdictions. So with that, I'm excited to announce John Odell from the city of Worcester, Massachusetts, who's going to spend about 10 minutes now talking about the Green Worcester plan, and then we'll get into some discussion a little bit later on. So with that, John, you can take things away.
All right, well, thank you, John. Appreciate the opportunity here. So I'll get right to it. First, I wanted to start talking a little bit about the development of the Green Worcester plan. So one of the key pieces is, if you go to the next slide, you can see how we did on our, how we determined if there was a real need, and how if we were able to make sure that folks were going to be supportive of what we hoped to do. And so we did a survey. We did a telephone survey of 606 folks, and the results were even better than we anticipated in terms of the value of making the city more sustainable. As you can see, we had just about 90% of the folks who responded said that it was at least somewhat or even very important that we pursue making the city more sustainable. Interesting side note, the people of color were at 74% for very important, and the white community was at 59. So leave it. You can make a value judgment there, but I think it's pretty clear as to what that means. So if you go to the next one. So the Green Worcester Plan is guided by 3 lenses, and this is pretty key throughout the development of the plan. We wanted to be very sure that we included an equity lens, a health lens, and of course a prosperity lens. So these are pretty self-explanatory, but just to, at least on a high level, I just want to make sure that, equity means different things to different people. And for our plan, we basically defined it as all people have the same rights to live, work, and play in a healthy environment and make decisions about their environment. That's how we defined it, and that's how we tried to develop the plan with those thoughts in mind. And I think ultimately having that made the plan a stronger plan. I think it's something that really is key in terms of how anyone develops their plans in terms of decarbonization or sustainability. Health is another critical lens. In our case, our definition was to ensure that policies and actions promote healthy outcomes and avoid harmful health impacts. One of the interesting pieces that comes out of looking through a health lens is that I was doing some research on this, and it turns out that pollution that's related to fossil fuel emissions is far more harmful than I actually realized before I'd read this report. About 8 million people suffer premature deaths in the world due to pollution related to fossil fuel, related to fossil fuels. And if you translate that down to the size of the city of Worcester, when this report was done in 2018, the census said we had about 185,000 people. That translates, when you go down to 185,000 people from roughly 7.6 billion people in the world, the math says about just under 200 people every year in Worcester are pass away before they should have because of pollution-related, fossil fuel-related emissions. That's a pretty big number. If that number was translated to, gun safety or anything else like that, this would be considered an unbelievably big crisis. And yet a lot of folks don't know this. So health is a really important lens to look through this, any plan you put together. And the last is pretty self-explanatory, prosperity. It's got to work economically or you won't be able to implement it. I mean, the dollar numbers have to make sense for everybody. Ultimately, there's going to be negative impacts on certain segments, but the goal is to minimize those and to maximize the overall benefits for everyone, both financially, of course, as well as for health, equity, and of course, the health of the planet. Next slide. So what is the Worcester Green Plan? It's a broad strategic framework for sustainability and resilience, and it's an integrated systemic approach for making Worcester the greenest medium-sized city in the country. Part of this is aspirational, but if you don't think big, you often don't get big things done. And it's a plan focused on city leaderships, our goals, strategies, and actions in partnership. And it's got to be in partnership with residents, businesses, institutions, nonprofits, and the state and federal governments. So it's an all-inclusive plan. As important as it's to talk about what the plan is, next slide, please, is to define what the plan isn't, because it isn't a prescriptive blueprint with a detailed analysis for every possible step we could take. I mean, that's a rabbit hole that is tempting to go down when you start to go look at these things, but it's just, there's no way your plan will be obsolete as you finish it. As John mentioned earlier, it's really important not to have a proper balance of planning and implementation, and timing, of course, is key. So this is does not deal too deeply on specifics. It gives an outline. Instead, it's an integrated framework or an umbrella plan. So the analogy I like to think of it's more of a menu as opposed to a recipe for a specific item on that menu. But putting together a menu for what your restaurant is going to serve is really important. It defines what kind of restaurant, or in our case, what kind of city we want to have in terms of implementing a sustainability plan. Last slide, please. So real quick, I wanted to just touch on some of the things that are in the plan. Now, our plan, it covers a lot more than just energy. It also touches on waste management, water resource management, education, transportation, and a whole bunch of other things. But for this topic, I want to focus on, these are the high-level goals that talk more specifically to decarbonization. And in our case, what we have is 3 key goals. By 2030, we're 100% renewable in all our municipal facilities. That's something we can control directly, which is thought it was an achievable goal for us. Tough one, but achievable. By 2035, 100% renewable energy citywide, and by 2045, 100% renewable energy across all heating and transportation throughout the city. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what our plan is regarding emission reductions and decarbonization, and a quick view as to the background as to how we put this together. So with that, I'll turn it back to John.
Thank you very much, John. A good overview there of the Green Worcester plan, and we'll get into some more of the details here in a moment, or in about 10 minutes, after Troy from the city of Portland talks a little bit about their plan there in Portland. So Troy, with that, you can take it away.
Great, thanks, John. I'm really happy to be here this morning. Appreciate the invitation to talk with our friends at Neep. We really appreciate the support we've gotten from Neep over the years. So happy to reciprocate a bit here. So just a few key points about our plan. The city of Portland actually developed a joint climate action plan with the city of South Portland. It was adopted by the city council, both of our city councils, just about a year ago, back in November 2020. And it's pretty unusual to have 2 communities working together on a joint plan. At the time, I think maybe we might have been the first municipalities in the country to do so, but since then we've noticed a few others that are starting to do collaborative work, including right here in New England. Beverly and Salem, Mass are working on a joint climate action plan as well. But the reason that we decided we wanted to work together is, we have a history of collaboration across. There's a bridge that separates our 2 cities, and we collaborate across the bridge historically, and particularly on sustainability and climate issues. Our cities are really aligned. We have the same goals. Both of our city councils endorsed plans to reduce emissions 80% by 2050. Both of our cities have pledged to run municipal operations on 100% renewable energy by 2040. And during the process of our climate action plan development, both of our city councils declared climate emergencies and asked us to try to accelerate our actions and strategies to reduce emissions as much as we can by 2030. So that kind of put some sense of urgency into the work we're doing. But just in terms of our development process, we decided that working together was going to be really effective for a couple of different reasons. One, we wanted to demonstrate regional leadership. We both agreed that having, each of our cities, Portland and South Portland, could have really excellent climate action plans, but if our strategies didn't interlock and add synergy between our efforts, they wouldn't be as effective. So we want to model that. Climate change is not just a municipal problem. It's a regional, national, international problem. So we wanted to work together. But also in terms of strategy, it made sense for us to pool our efforts to make it, just to make things easier for both of us. We both have very small teams, or 2 people on our Portland staff leading the effort, and 2 people on the South Portland side leading the effort. So by joining our forces, we were able to do twice as much. Portland, South Portland is about a third of the size of Portland. So doing, the plans together wasn't necessarily twice as hard. And I think it might have been twice as easy, actually. And so we were able to pool our funds in order to hire a better consulting team. So between both cities, we were able to put together $220,000 to hire a really great consulting team to help us with the plan development. But we put a ton of staff time into it. So it's, I was trying to think, someone asked me the other day, like how much that was the cost overall, including the amount of staff effort. And it's really hard to say. We did put a lot of time at the staff level into making this plan a success. But it was totally worth it, I think. And overall, it took us about 18 months to do the plan. We started with our outreach and engagement back in February 2019, and we wrapped it up in August of 2020. Spent some time drafting the plan and got it adopted by our city councils in November of 2020. And throughout that process, we developed a number of other documents to support our work. So we did, of course, a greenhouse gas inventory for both of our communities. And we also developed a comprehensive climate vulnerability assessment for both communities as well, that we're really pleased and excited has become adopted around the region. Our county emergency management agency has grabbed onto it and is incorporating it into their emergency management plans. So that was really excellent. We were really happy to see that. And we did, one of the reasons it took so much staff time is because we really had a really strong emphasis on community engagement. I know with our staff and our consulting team, we felt like, we could have sat around a room and come up with a credible, a credible climate action plan, but it would have been our plan. It wouldn't have been the community's plan. So we literally spent, most of that 18 months engaging with community members. We had over 100 separate engagement events around both cities, everything from public meetings to hanging out in local shops where people meet. We had a book group. We had engaged volunteers who rode the bus and talked to people on the bus and talked to people in parks. We thought that was super important, just to hear what people had to say in all parts of the community. We really tried to go where people were to talk about our plan and get a lot of input, and it still continues. We are continuing our heavy focus on engagement, so people know what our plan is, and we hear their voices and incorporate the community's needs and desires into our implementations plan. And so the plan has 4 focus areas: so building energy, transportation, land use, waste reduction, and resilience. And throughout all those sectors, there's 68 particular strategies that we're implementing across all of those. But with Neep, we're mostly concerned about our building sector. That's our main focus here in Neep. And so it also is our main focus with One Climate Future, our climate action plan, because our greenhouse gas inventory tells us that 60% of our emissions in Portland and South Portland are from the building sector. So that's where a lot of our effort is really put moving forward to achieve our plan. And as John mentioned earlier in the presentation, renewable energy and electrification are the most significant things that we have in our plan in terms of meeting our climate goals. So greening the grid is our number 1 thing. If we look at our wedge analysis graph that shows the most impactful things, so greening the grid is number 1. So Maine has 100% renewable portfolio standard, and that's like literally the largest section of our wedge analysis. So we're keeping, we want to work really hard to make sure that the state is implementing that 100% clean energy policy for the grid. But locally, we certainly want to focus on deploying renewable energy through distributed generation here in Portland. We have a goal of, between Portland and South Portland, putting in 245 megawatts of solar in our cities by 2040, and then definitely electrification and efficiency in our building sector. So that involves a lot of work. We've been really active at the state level, working on better policies for energy and solar. So we were really engaged in creating new net energy billing programs for the state. We really were strong advocates of some financial tools that we need to help our private business owners decarbonize through CPACE legislation, as well as creating a statewide green bank to help finance projects. In Portland, we have an energy benchmarking ordinance that's going to be really essential. We're in the process of implementing it now. We're working really closely with our utility to get better access to data. And our next step, once that's up and running smoothly, is to incorporate building performance standards. We adopted the 2021 IECC Energy Code back in July, and we're enforcing the Zero Energy Appendix, which we're really excited about. We've got a group, we're convening a group of local folks with, with Portland Society for Architecture, a local organization that supports better building, along with the American Institute for Architecture Maine chapter, convening panels and groups of local developers and building professionals to promote better buildings. And we're really excited that we're kicking off a program called Electrify Everything, starting like another week or two, actually. That's going to be focused on, this first round will be really focused on helping homeowners and small businesses adopt electrification for their buildings, everything from solar panels, that's community solar, to heat pumps, to water heating heat pumps. We're going to partner with a local contractor, as well as our state efficiency organization, Efficiency Maine, to help people make that a reality. And we're also working really closely on EV infrastructure. We've just recently deployed about 15 new level 2 chargers, and we're on the verge of announcing a major expansion of EV charging infrastructure to include multiple fast chargers and a whole more fleet of level 2 chargers for our community. But that's kind of it in a nutshell, and happy to jump into more conversation with attendees and John.
Yes, the two Johns. Thank you very much, Troy. Good to get an overview of the work and hear about some of the priorities here in the near term. We've got a bunch of questions already coming into the chat box, which we will get to. Please continue to send those in. Any thoughts or comments are welcome. You can see on your screen there. You can type it into the chat box. One thing I wanted to kind of jump back to early on in these processes, communities have the intention to get a lot of input from stakeholders across the region. They want to hear from all the different type, the residents, the business owners, folks that weren't previously engaged in these projects. I'm curious if you have any kind of successes and maybe, failures along the way when it comes to doing outreach to your communities. What seemed to work really well and what maybe didn't. I know, Troy, you talked a bit about meeting community members where they are. So yeah, any thoughts on what worked best, what didn't?
It really depends on the community members, I think. And that was what we really learned through our process, is that it really depends on where people are. So with, we have a number of we have people who are really engaged in climate work, and sometimes they would get frustrated with us because the messaging was, basic. We really wanted to get the basic information about climate change and how it's affecting the city. So the climate, the activists were like, why, this is too simple, we need to get more. But a lot of people needed that basic information. So I always told the activists, like, look, we could hold a public meeting at 2 a.m. on Sunday morning and you guys would show up. So we need to think of ways to reach more people. So that's why we really tried to do things like ride the bus and talk to people who otherwise we would never have a conversation with. And I'd say, that was really the key, just diverse approaches. We did online, we did in person, book groups, just that was the key, I think, that made it work, was just lots of people, lots of different things.
Yeah, makes sense. John, what about you? I know you talked about the survey. What were some of your outreach strategies there to make sure people were filling it out?
Yeah, so we decided to go not on a typical online survey. We thought it made more sense to do a telephone survey, including cell phone customers, just because that seems to be the best way to get a fair representative sample. And our polling firm was, Mass Inc., which does a lot of polling for the region, pretty reputable company. So we felt pretty good that they were going to be able to give us a survey that had real meaning in terms of reaching out to all potential constituents in our city. we didn't go to the level that Troy and his team did. I give super big props to Troy for all the work that you guys have done in terms of reaching out to folks directly. We did less of that, candidly. The survey was sort of the marker, and then we went out and we had public events throughout the city to solicit input. But that is more of a self-selecting kind of group, which is the drawback of that. I mean, to your point, there was a core group of people that showed up for every one of those. Mm-hmm. And less for each one's that were new folks proportionally. So that's a big. I think I'm picking up stuff here as well. That's a great way as we start rolling out implementation, that we should be doing more of that outreach. That's part of the plan, is to make sure we spread the word through social media and other avenues, but also more directly, just to go where the people are and reach out to them that way and let them know what's going on.
There's a question in the Q&A, John, I wanted to get to. What was the hardest part of the engagement piece? And I think it's a really important thing to note, because like John in Worcester, it's really important that we have a strong equity component to our plan as well, and we wanted to make sure, as we did our outreach to the community, that we really focused on people in the community who don't always participate, marginalized members, people in poverty, people of color, immigrant community. But it's hard to reach. We found it difficult to. We didn't do as well as we would have hoped. We really made a strong effort, but we found that we didn't have the relationships that are really important to really work with those members of our community. So we were connecting with some of our social service agencies and our Portland Adult Ed, which has a lot of programming for the immigrant community. And we were somewhat successful, but it's something that we're continuing to work really hard and working to build those relationships. And so as we work into our Electrify Everything program, that's going to be a real focus because electrification and heat pumps and weatherizing homes is super helpful. It's going to help people who are of less income than it will help others. So we're going to continue to work really hard on that and try to do an even better job.
One of the areas too that we've just discovered, or we've just started tapping into, is church organizations. There's an interfaith community where a number of faith organizations work together on certain topics. Sustainability and climate change is definitely one of them. So we've been reaching out to them and setting up meetings going forward to talk to congregations. Once the pandemic passes a little bit, we're trying to set specific times so that we can meet either before or after services, just to, or even during service. Some folks actually set aside a little time for letting me talk during a service about what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. So getting the word out through whatever means you have is what you got to do, and that may be a valuable option for us.
Yeah, it seems like really thinking early on in the process about your connections to community members or community groups. Thinking about how to get the word out through those existing relationships is key, and making it very unique to your own kind of businesses and community members. I think there's no cookie cutter or one size all fits approach, but hopefully people can kind of take bits and pieces of this conversation and implement it for themselves. Question about what each of your plans covers. Somebody asked, does the Worcester plan include businesses and residents? So maybe you both can just kind of clarify the scope of the buildings portion of the plans, maybe starting with you, John.
Sure. And the short answer is yes, it's all inclusive. So the building portion it's basically a two-prong approach. So one is we have an electric aggregation already in the city, which is basically we can take folks that were on national grids. That's our electric supplier. National Grid's basic service, we took them all basically with an opt-out option for folks and aggregated them into one big group where we could buy electricity for them and include a green component, which we did. We basically doubled the amount of electricity that's on the grid, went from about 18% to 40%. So that was one way we're trying to target everybody. As it turns out, most small businesses were on the national grid rate and most residents were, but the larger businesses, folks who actually have some expertise in managing their accounts, electric and other utility accounts, weren't on it. So they are on a separate supplier. Usually they can go out and get a pretty good deal on their own, and have done so. And so we couldn't, if someone was, had another deal with, say, Constellation or Edison or whoever it may be, we couldn't poach them. They had to come willingly. So part of our effort is to work with National Grid so that we could identify who these customers were without giving any information away. That's a tough one because National Grid, it's like Fort Knox about any of their information. So it's, which I understand in many ways, but what we're looking to do is to work with them so that we can reach out and say that we have a pretty good opportunity here that can actually meet your own climate goals, because lots of these organizations are now putting together or have already put together plans to be more sustainable and to market that. And this is an opportunity to do that. Or if they decide to go that route on their own, which is fine too, they don't have to go through our aggregation. We want to make sure they get extra credit for that and that we credit them for what they're trying to do too. So it's a mutual benefit in that sense. So yes, the short answer to that question is yes, everybody's included.
Same here in Portland. Our plan is community-wide, so our existing commercial and residential buildings are both included. There's a lot of work to do. I mean, decarbonizing and creating energy efficiency in our existing building stock is like the second most significant thing we can do to move the needle. Again, it's somewhat outside of our direct control. For new buildings, new construction, we can enforce, pretty strict energy codes, but for existing buildings, it's going to be helping the business owners find the tools and the financing to make that a reality. And I think we're going to work towards performance standards for existing buildings and regulate improvements over time, but there's we have to help them meet that goal. Part of our Electrify Everything program will have community solar options, so business owners can buy in to we have a pretty robust community solar program here in Maine, so people can buy renewable energy directly from that, but it's going to be a lot of work to do for sure.
Yeah, it seems like with a lot of the communities we're working with, it's a challenging balance of working with residents and business owners on kind of mandates or requiring things of them versus trying to get them to do things voluntarily. So, finding that balance, finding that appetite, from community members is a part of this process. I just want to stay on kind of the stakeholder engagement piece for another moment or so, and I guess this is somewhat related to that, but addressing the low to moderate income rental buildings, how have you all kind of dealt with that maybe in the past or in this plan? The split incentive issue is always a big one when we're talking about energy efficiency between landlords and renters. Do you have any kind of key strategies around that or engagement strategies with those groups?
Go first. It's hard. It's a hard problem. In some of the ways we've been thinking about doing it, that was one of the reasons we were really supportive of the CPACE program, because that is a tool that that owners of multifamily buildings can use to do work in a building that sort of addresses the split incentive, but not entirely. So some of the other things we're thinking about, and we've talked with some of our policymakers, is energy disclosure for tenants, so they understand what the full costs of renting a unit are. And any smaller apartments that where tenants pay their own utility bills, encouraging landlords to install heat pumps for the tenants to reduce their energy costs. But there's no, I really think that the multifamily sector is going to be like the most difficult one to achieve, and to the energy savings and transition that we want to see. It's going to be tougher, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's a huge nut to crack, and it's not like a secret. This has been an issue since the 80s, really. I mean, people have been talking about this for a long time in terms of how to bridge that gap. One of the things that Cambridge has done, Cambridge, Mass, and that we're looking to potentially explore as well is changing some of the zoning regulations on typical like 3 families. In Worcester, we have thousands of 3-family units. And I know a lot of other communities in New England have similar. And allowing zoning to allow the build of a 4th unit that would essentially then could be used to help pay for the improvements that need to be done. That additional rental income can offset some of those costs that would need to be done to do any kind of serious retrofitting of a home, whether it be for insulation or electrification or some combination thereof. And of course, it should be done together as best as possible. So that's one avenue we want to explore in terms of a policy change. Another option that we're also looking at in Worcester is doing a program that essentially supports our Mass Save program in Massachusetts. So the utilities offer a pretty robust program, but there's gaps for sure. And a lot of the people who take advantage of that program are middle class or better. And so what we're looking to do is to fill in some of those gaps with funds that we may get from either city funds or perhaps the state or federal government that can supplement it, or grants, and use those funds to basically bridge that gap so that lower income folks can take the advantage of those benefits too. That still doesn't quite solve the problem, but it's a big step forward, we think. I mean, if you solve the financial problem, a lot of the other problems become much smaller hurdles to cross. Yeah. So we're hoping to do that.
Yeah, 100%. That's one of our strategies as well with our Electrify Everything program. Like I mentioned, we're partnering with Efficiency Maine to promote their incentives and their rebates, and with other low-income programs to help people of lesser economic means to electrify their homes. But in some cases, we know that there'll be a gap between what the incentives and rebates offer, and maybe there's maybe there's $1,000 difference between what's available for incentives and rebates versus what the cost is. So we're identifying funding sources to pay that difference. So the person who really needs that heat pump to make their home cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter, and reduce their costs, we can give them that extra fund to make that reality for them. So that's a key part of our Electrify Everything equity piece for sure.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see unfold, Troy, and see how that works. If that does push people kind of over that that threshold there to get heat pumps. Yeah, so I'm excited to follow along with that one. We've gotten a couple of questions about grid capacity. How has that kind of entered into the equation in these plans? With transitioning to electrifying, things like heating systems. Has that been a big factor for both of you in this planning process? And how have you kind of gone about that?
Huge factor. I don't believe that our grid in Portland can actually support full electrification right now. I mean, there's constraints on a number of circuits. So we're in active communication with the utility, Central Maine Power, as well as our PUC and the governor's energy office, and talking about what are we going to do. It's a big issue for Portland. It's a big issue for the state, and we really have to do better. So we're looking at every possible way. We're active interveners in a PUC docket on non-wires alternatives for the Portland region. We're going to be really aggressive in promoting improvements, both in both in terms of local distribution infrastructure, but also how can we harness new technologies to make even better use of the capacity we have? And is there ways we can shift load to different times? Can we better integrate renewables and battery storage? It's like we have to start thinking differently. It's not just about adding more power plants and building more transmission to the city. It's got to be all of the above for sure.
Exactly. And of course, no knock to the folks at the utilities. That's just their business, but that's their first choice, is to just let's add capacity. And of course, the ratepayers end up paying for that. And so it's definitely got to, I mean, there will be some of that probably that needs to be done to some degree in certain areas. But as Troy just well mentioned, there's smart metering so that we can balance loads better, and much more aggressive efforts. In our case in Massachusetts, the Mass Save program has a pretty good program in terms of how much they will pay for insulation and air sealing work, but it's not, the uptick on that is not nearly as high as it needs to be. So, you know, money isn't the only obstacle. Part of it is a lot of folks just don't even know that Mass Save, what it does and what, despite a much more pronounced effort on the part of the utilities. So part of that here in Worcester is we gotta step that up too, both from the city's perspective and anyone else who knows about these kinds of services, so that we can lower the demand load. You lower the load, you build that, you know, there's less need for additional capacity on the system. So it's an all inclusive approach, as Troy just alluded to. We really got to make sure that we are looking at every, you know, leave no rocks unturned on this, because that is going to be one of the fundamental obstacles of making this and meeting the goals in the time frame we want to do it.
Yeah, I think, you know, focusing on energy efficiency, reducing the load, but thinking kind of whole building or whole home approaches is really important when we're having this conversation, so that you're not doing kind of one-off things. You know, you're looking at it comprehensively, tackling a couple of things at a time, you know, if possible. In that vein, I guess I'm curious how, I've had a couple of questions about the federal funding. How are you all thinking about, will this assist with that type of work? I know it's maybe still early to be thinking about that, but I guess, yeah, do you have any kind of current plans with some of the federal funding?
We're not entirely. I'll be curious to see what we end up with. I know we're looking forward to seeing what comes out to us in the energy efficiency block grant that was refunded. I'm not sure what the number is going to be for Portland, but in terms of like the Build Back Better type funds, where I'm trying to develop plans as if we're not going to get it. It would be great if we do. That would really could be a game changer. But that's why we're thinking about what do we have available for existing funds, existing programs that we can do a better job with, and how do we create opportunities for private finance? Because frankly, that's the most nimble way to get things done, rather than waiting around to see what we get for federal grants. There are private sector investors who are ready to go. I know with our Electrify Everything program, our private sector partner has access to a variety of different financing streams that we can take advantage of, and we're really hopeful to work with a state level green bank and get that up and running. That can help help people de-risk loans for energy projects and do gap financing. I think the private equity market's going to have to be a huge player to move this forward.
Yep, what Troy said.
Sounds good. One thing I'm thinking about from kind of the Neep perspective is how we can help communities and states, with these federal funds. If we can work with some of our partners to identify those projects, some of those options or things to know about the funding, that's something that we are definitely interested in doing. So it's good to hear some of your thoughts on it, right now. Another question, or a couple of questions, came in around benchmarking and labeling. Troy, I know Portland has had a benchmarking ordinance, so I guess first starting there, kind of how that's going. I know you encountered some issues early on with some of the data access things from the utility up there, but yeah, I'm curious kind of current status of it is and how you're thinking about the future of that, and then maybe what's happening in Worcester in that regard as well.
Sure. So we adopted our energy benchmarking ordinance in 2017. We gave people a little bit of time to get prepared for that. And so, and doing, as part of that preparation, we realized that any building that had multiple tenants was going to have a really hard time complying, because it's just challenging if you have like a building with, 10 or more tenants, and we have a lot of those that do, it's, just the way that data is accessible from the utility, it was very, very challenging for them to do that. So a couple of years ago, we made an amendment to the ordinance that requires any building with a single primary occupant. We define that as any one tenant with 90% of the floor space and 20,000 square feet would be required to comply with our ordinance. That's about 200 buildings. And so we're working really hard to get these 200 buildings up and running. And this year, it's one of our priorities. And so we've let the commercial sector know that people who don't play ball this year may have financial penalties coming their way if they don't report their data. And we're also continuing to work closely with Central Maine Power on getting access to whole building aggregated data. So it's been an ongoing struggle with them to upgrade their data platform, but I'm thinking they're getting really close. I saw they demonstrated an upgraded version of their energy manager software for their client, for the public facing website. And I was ready to be underwhelmed, but I have to say I was very impressed with the demonstration site. So they think that will be ready to roll out by the end, fall of 2022, which would open the door for the other 600 buildings that are required to comply. So I'm going to take them at their word that they're going to get that ready to roll, and by May of 2023, we should have all 800 buildings, subject to the reporting requirements. So, knock on wood, that will happen. So
yes, that's great. John, what about benchmarking or anything happening in Worcester on that front?
No, we haven't pursued that as a priority yet. It's clearly something we're looking into. It's a great opportunity. You gotta, you can't manage what you don't measure, is a true statement. So you got to be able to do that. So we're looking at that as something that needs to be done for our larger buildings for sure. Our first effort is to look at emissions on our citywide level as a whole. We haven't done that in a while, so that's an ongoing survey right now. We're getting all that data collected through 2019, just before the pandemic hit, was the last year we have, we think good data. So that we hope to have the next 2 or 3 months, sometime mid-spring, we should have that data in place, and that'll, I think, make the case for us that we need this kind of reporting from our larger buildings. But I think it's a step process for us, and we're a step behind the good folks in Portland right now.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of communities are at that stage where they recognize the importance of it, but kind of doing on maybe a leading by example effort at first, then maybe voluntary, and kind of ramping up efforts, over time on the benchmarking front. So I know we're getting close to noontime. I'm curious if you each could talk a little bit about something that you're really excited about in the not too distant future, an implementation strategy or community engagement event, anything that is really you're looking forward to here, maybe in 2022.
I guess I'll jump in. So I'm really excited about the Electrify Everything program that we're launching. I think it has the potential to be really successful. Our residential, our heating stock here, the heating fuel for most of our building stock here is still oil. So there's a huge opportunity for electrification. So we've done some work, we've mapped out which homes have oil, and it's a lot. So great opportunity there. And I'm also really excited about the city is currently undergoing what we call recodes, our first effort to redo our land use code in a generation. And so this explicit intent of the recode project is to align our land use code, our zoning rules, with our climate action plan and our comprehensive plan. So that has an opportunity to be transformative, and if we get it right, it's going to make it a lot easier to reach our climate goals. And so that's going to, our planning department's 100% engaged in that effort, and happy to be part of that. I'm really excited about it.
Very exciting.
Yeah, that's excellent stuff. This is the beauty of these kind of meetings is you pick up a lot of stuff that you just wouldn't have otherwise. Just listening to what you're doing here, Troy, and even just reading some of the questions in the chat, it prompted a lot of thoughts on my part. But the two of the things that I think would be really, we're really excited about. I know you asked one, but I'm going to give you two. One is, well, first of all, the quick backstory is, the Sustainability Resilience Department for the city started in July of this year. So it's really, we're new in terms of being a separate organization. We were combined with the facilities department prior. And so this is, we're building out our capacity. I'm pretty excited about that. So just building that capacity, we just hired a couple of people. So we have 4 now. We're like Portland and South Portland together, right here in Worcester. Is really good, and we're looking forward to continue to do that and make the case for that. And as part of that, the city is also looking at creating a transportation department, which has also been sort of like people in planning and people in DPW have been working, and our inspectional services department have been working sort of somewhat cohesively together, but not as cohesively as they could. And transportation represents a significant amount of emissions for our city. And so creating that department through a lens of sustainability, as well as, of course, safety and ADA compliance and everything else, but having that lens as part of it right from the beginning. And our department is the one that's going to draft the plan for the implementation plan, is how this works, is going to be a huge benefit, I think, for when that department hits the ground running next fiscal year. So we're pretty excited about that. That's a big one for us, just sort of getting things organized in a way that really all hands on deck and we're all have the same kind of goals in place and in mind. And the second is we're looking to do a green transformational project across the city using some of our ADA funds that our ARPA funds that we just got. And that is a project that has sustainable, not necessarily specifically on buildings, but more dealing with the green environment in terms of how we can lower the heat island effect in a lot of our underserved areas, and making sure that we do things in a way that they appreciate, that they want us to do. So it's that outreach that we need to do as part of that, and figure out what the best methodology will be to implement, and make it a very collaborative effort. But there's some funding there that allows us to really make an impact, we think, in terms of both our flooding control and our heat island index control issues that we have in the city. So especially in some of our underserved areas. So we're pretty excited about moving forward on that avenue too.
Yeah, that's great. Both the initiatives and Portland and Worcester, very comprehensive, going beyond just energy and buildings like we talked about here today. So, if folks on the line are developing those types of comprehensive plans, I think these are great models to take a look at. Hopefully we'll give you lots of great ideas. John, I know you had mentioned a study kind of early on about health impacts. Somebody had chimed in asking to send the link there. So maybe if you could share that with me, I can send that out in some of our follow-up materials. But yeah, and there's a few other questions. I apologize, we weren't able to get through everything. A lot of good content coming in, and maybe some areas for follow-up discussions. But just in our last couple of minutes here, I wanted to say, a huge thank you to both Troy and John for joining us today, sharing all their expertise, getting the conversation started. It was really interesting to hear about the initiatives in both cities respectively. So thank you very much. And with that, I will just share a couple of resources that we have on the Neep site if folks want to take a look at things related to the conversation that we've been having here today. On the residential side of things, home energy labeling initiatives, green real estate. On community-wide initiatives, we have a lot of resources to help folks start planning, similar to the plans that both Troy and John have been talking about. We have a lot of information on benchmarking and building performance standards, which will be more of a topic in the future for us. And then we also have a lot of content on things like zero energy schools. So if you're looking for specific strategies for some of your building types in your community, you can find some of that on our website as well. So yeah, take a look at neep.org for a ton of free resources. Reach out to me if you have any additional questions or want further assistance with things. I'm happy to jump on a call with folks. And lastly, thank you all for joining us. As we mentioned, this is the first webinar in our Ready, Set, Scale series. The next one will be coming to you in February on the 22nd, also at 11 a.m. And this one is focused on stretch codes. So there were a couple of comments that came in about Portland adopting the 2018 IECC. So join us next month to do a deeper dive on initiatives around energy codes. So with that, I just want to thank our two presenters again. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll follow up with the slides and some other materials as well. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.